Welcome to the Supply Chain Pioneers podcast, where we highlight industry leaders on the forefront of innovation and technology in planning, procurement, and logistics. Hosted by your supply chain pro to know, Ulf Venne.
Supply Chain Pioneers is powered by Everstream Analytics. Everstream gives you the predictive insights and analytics to make your supply chain faster, smarter, safer, and leaner. Go to everstream.ai to book your demo today. Hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of Supply Chain Pioneers. And today it's a Christmas edition where we look back at the year with guests that came on this year actually, and we'll have some fun hopefully doing that. So first and foremost, I want to introduce Nadine.
Hi, nice to be here.
Then we have Hansen with us today.
Hello again.
And Jon Davis.
Hello, everybody.
So, and the way this is going to go is we're first talking a little bit about the holiday season. Then we look back into the year, and then eventually we will look forward into the future and do some predictions. And we do this with people from operational experience with Nadine. We have Hansen, who's really focused on the procurement space and solutions providers. And then also we have Jon Davis as the mastermind behind supply chain meteorology. And with that, we start maybe with something personal. Can each of you maybe share a holiday Christmas story that has something to do with supply chain? Maybe Hansen, maybe we start with you.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because way back in the 60s, during the Christmas season, they used to have strings of lights that went around the tree. And when one light bulb went out, the entire line went out. So you'd have to spend half an hour. Now, remember, Jon?
Oh, yeah.
And you're literally cursing because you're saying, is this the one? Is this the one? That's like supply chain, if you think about it. Only as strong as the weakest link. They don't have that anymore. Now trees come, you get artificial trees with lights, plug play, ready to go. And if one blows, it doesn't affect the other ones. But I miss those days of being able to get those lights in there. You felt like you were more involved. It's like with procurement, relying on the old Thomas Register or the paper clips and the folded corners and whatever else. So that's a Christmas analogy I like to use for these kinds of discussions.
That's good. Yeah, I love that. Nadine, anything as exciting to follow up with?
To be honest, it's really hard for me to think back in time because ever since I'm in supply chain, it feels like everything that happened is already gone, because you're focusing on the next big thing to manage operationally. So maybe the story to share is that last year, when it was the first time that I was really engaged in transport risk management during the holiday season, I realized, there is not really holiday season because basically every single day it's managing risk. So I'm talking about the Suez Canal, the Red Sea attacks, of course, that were launched by the Houthis. And that was really a revelation for me after a long year of building up a department and really ramping up with a team, having some successes. You really look forward to holidays, and then supply chain happens while you're making plans. And I think that is probably the biggest lesson that I learned having switched over to risk management last year, that you better plan ahead in terms of proactively trying to prepare for the next big thing, because then you have time to eventually take some rest here and there, because that will make you resilient also personally. So I hope, fingers crossed, that this year nothing is happening that will keep supply chain years up over the holiday period.
There's also no build up to something that might happen at all in the world right now. So it's definitely going to be very calm.
It's very quiet. It's super quiet,
Yeah,
right? No one is expecting anything right now.
It's
so
great. Jon Davis this time. This is going to be a lot of getting used to.
Jon
D. What's your personal Christmas story?
So when I think back to the holidays and I think back to my working career, I'm going to go way back in the time machine to December of 1989. I was in the States at the time. Now I live in Barcelona. But in the States, it was an incredibly cold December, one of the coldest periods ever in the States. I was working in energy quite a bit, in agriculture and those types of things in the supply chain. And during that critical period, I came down with chicken pox as I was at with family at a wedding, and I got chicken pox. So the whole month I had chicken pox, and this is December '89. So there's no computers, there's no cell phones, and in my office in downtown Chicago, I had a friend that would bring me the maps in my office every day, and I would look at the maps and take calls on our landline, and I got through it overall. But it was one of the most critical periods, and I didn't feel good, and I'm taking oatmeal baths while I'm on the phone with chicken pox. I was kind of
Oh,
quarantined the
goodness.
entire month, but from a resilience standpoint, got through it. Everybody was covered. A really interesting period. Then in January, it went very warm. So it was a really interesting period overall. But when I think back to the holidays and weather and the supply chain, in this case, energy and agriculture, I think back to December '89, which was a holiday period I'll never forget.
That's good.
It's intense.
I love that. Let's maybe move to the next obvious question. So, what is a Christmas movie that you might relate to supply chain? And even if it needs a little bit of a spin, so even if it's somewhat creative, maybe you have one for me. So, Nadine, maybe we start with you here.
Well, to be honest, I don't watch TV anymore since I'm in supply chain, so I don't know what you're talking about. Honestly, all of these, Netflix series, whatever is out there, I'm not up to date at all. So people are always in the office like, here, this. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I know that the Terminator is not really a Christmas movie, but I like to think of it in terms of a Christmas movie right now. And that's what supply chain management is about. You're terminating one crisis from another. You're just trying to survive. And it's like Endgegner, as we say it in German. But really, I don't have really time to watch in my free time anything. It's like my phone is glued to my body, so I have all the supply chain related risks coming to me, so I can immediately delegate and ramp up the team. Sorry, no creative choices there.
But it's good. We're glad you had the time to join once again, at least for a little bit of a relaxed session, actually.
To jump again to the next
thing. Of course, yeah, logically, yeah. So, Jon Davis, what's going on in your world?
So this is not specifically a Christmas movie, but it is a holiday movie. And it's planes, trains, and automobiles. And within that movie, there's so much great weather. That whole movie evolves around weather and disruptions at airports and disruptions on trains and roads and blizzards. But it's a great weather movie overall. And it's one of my favorite movies and totally applicable to the supply chain with supply chain disruptions in the winter. It's actually a Thanksgiving movie kind of taking place in the States, but it's a holiday movie overall and exemplifies the transportation things that we all go through in the winter with winter weather and things like that. But yeah, planes, trains, and automobiles.
That's a good choice.
Great movie. I'm a kid. I could watch that over and over again and laugh as hard as I did the first time I watched it. That's a great choice. I got to tell you, it was for me is Home Alone. And again, Thanksgiving, whatever. Sometimes when you're in procurement, like you're home alone. And you've got all of these things you have to do and plan, and no one's noticed you're missing until you're missing. And so
that's so funny, Jon.
That for me, that sort of parallels the life of procurement and holidays and whatnot.
Actually, when I was just listening to John D, that was the movie that came up to in my mind, actually. And I'm actually sitting on the other side of the fence, so to say, if you will. The procurement thinks it's Home Alone. SCM thinks it's Home Alone. We're not home alone in the end, if you just break down the
Yeah, I for me, it would also have been Home Alone, by the way, because my son has seen both movies this year for the very first time. Oh. And he loved them, obviously, because they're really good. Both of them.
Yes, some movies don't work, right? Some of these old movies don't work on kids from nowadays.
This one is still pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah.
Also, last year, we had also a discussion about movies and supply chain and holidays. And somebody mentioned Home Alone, and I posted a meme on LinkedIn. And that went quite well, I have to say. That was quite funny. I might actually redo that. Good. Perfect. So we talked about movies. Then obviously the holiday season is nothing without good music here and there. Jon Davis, what's your favorite Christmas song that might be related to supply chain and weather?
My favorite song is I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, but in my case, it's a nightmare because when you get a big winter storm, it causes all kinds of problems and we have all kind of calls and things that we have to do. So I love the song itself, but when there's a big winter storm issue anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, Europe or the US or East Asia, then we're on top and doing work with it. So it's not really a dream. It's a bit more of a nightmare when you get into those scenarios, especially over the holidays.
Good. What about you, John Hansen?
There's the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. Let us know. And you know what I like about the holidays? And what we do is sometimes you just got to say, all right, I'm down for the next 3-4 days. That's it. When Nadine was mentioning the phone, it's part of your, you wonder how you ever got along without it. Yeah. However we communicated, it's sometimes you just want that downtime. And just get ready for a new year coming, which will have its own fun things to deal with.
At one point, I worked in logistics operationally, and in winter, if we couldn't deliver on time, we always said it snowed in Austria because that's where the stuff went through, and nobody ever checked, frankly. So it was great.
It was taken for granted.
Yeah. It was great. It really helped, actually. Customer relationship was way better. So Nadine, what about you?
Actually, Melanie Thornton's Wonderful Dream. Holidays are coming, holidays are coming. That's the song of that was in the commercial of a big beverage manufacturer, right? And it's for two reasons. First of all, I love the lyrics of the song. I love the bells in the background and everything. Whenever I hear it the first time, I think this year I heard it end of November the first time, and I was completely set on Christmas mode already. But for two reasons, I connected to supply chain. First of all, I can relate to what you just said, John Hansen, about craving that downtime. If I hear this song, I'm like, okay, come on, a couple of more weeks and you're done. A couple of more weeks. At the same time, it reminds me of this kind of this year-end sprint that everyone is surprised that it's Christmas around the corner again. It comes at the same time every year, and still people are surprised every time, right? So it's like, holidays are coming. Oh, what? Really? I have to do this. And then I'm like, come on, people, planning. And I just said, supply chain happens while you're making plans. But if you have those plans, that actually allows you to have some life in between everything that's happening, right? Next time I'm going to hear Melanie Thornton's Wonderful Dream, actually think of the Squadcast here.
You sounded really good. I think you should, John. I'm sure you'll agree with me. You should sing a few more bars for us.
Oh, my goodness. I got that more often. It's not because I smoke. It's just natural voice. I got asked if I should, if I'm a jazz singer or something like that.
See, there you go.
Yeah, the hockey stick season is also always a surprise.
But only if you three are my background dancers or singers then.
Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
No.
Oh, I'm sure it would be a hoot, the supply engineers or something like that.
Yeah. The minor incidents.
Minor incident.
Okay, good. I think we now are in a better mood than where we started, right? We have calmed down a little bit, sure. A good intro, but now we want to look back. And then now we want to look back first on what for you was the biggest supply chain related news that you heard in this year. And because I think we might have two people having somewhat similar stories here, I want to start with Jon W. Hansen on this one.
Okay. I have to tell you, and again, I've been on both the provider and the practitioner side. In the late 90s, I built a software company, sold it for $12 million in 2001. Then the dot-com boom and bust happened. And I got out of it at the right time, some might suggest, although I think it was the worst mistake I ever made, selling the company. But I'm seeing those trends happening in 2024 leading to 2025 with regards to AI and the logos and the solution maps, etc. I think the trend that is going to happen is in 2025, and what we're seeing from 2024 is that about anywhere between 50, 60, 70% of the logos of the solution providers today will be gone. And a lot of them, interestingly enough, won't be just small unknown ones, but they'll also be larger organizations. And many right now who I've talked with abandoned their AI initiatives. You have Gartner coming out saying 88% of AI initiatives have failed to deliver the results. They also point the finger and say, well, it's because the practitioners were using it wrong. I don't agree with that. But the reality is, I think 2025 is going to be a shakeup year based upon everything that's been leading up in 2024. And that's what I've been tracking all the way through. And it'll be interesting to see the landscape on the other side as to who will be left as the players and consolidations and mergers. There's so much going on. But yeah, that's to me, the real story in 2024 is going to, what's the word I want to say, bloom in 2025.
Yeah. And that's why AI data should be human validated.
Critical thinking. And by the way, I love technology. When I built my software company, I used algorithms and a nascent AI platform. I think technology is, but you can't replace critical thinking. It's a tool. I look at ChatGPT the way I look at my old Funk and Wagnalls. Does anybody remember Funk and Wagnalls? The old dictionaries? Yes. And then you had Google and everything else. And the reality is these are tools that certainly make and getting information faster, but you still have to scrutinize it, and you still have to have some contextual experience to look at it. Like Nadine and Jon, in your past, how many times have what you've experienced in the past have you been able to put context on and say, I know this is coming, not because I'm predicting it, but because I've been through so much. And that's really where I think where your point comes in, Ulf, is that you have to always have the human element to discern and receiving. And a lot of time with the hype cycles, they were basically saying this will do it for you. It won't. Gen AI won't do it for you. Agentic AI won't do it for you. You need that human interface. So that's my 2 cents.
Good. And then we go to somebody who's leveraging AI and thinks about it very critically. Jon Davis. First of all, maybe you have a stance on that as well, but also how would you think about the biggest news that you see?
Of course, my news is going to be weather related overall, and not only as to what happened this year, but also what's going to happen, I think, next year overall. And it's the extreme weather events, the kind of the tails of the distribution, which there's been so many of those over the past year's time frame. Hurricanes in the southeast U.S., typhoons in the western Pacific, flooding events in many areas of the world, heat waves out there. And all of those have ramifications, especially the extreme ones. And those ramifications on companies, on people, on societies has continued to accelerate over the past 10, 15, 20 years. And every piece of research that we do that is done in my profession indicates that those extreme weather events and the fact that those extreme weather events have been increasing almost exponential lately, that continues into next year. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that from a standpoint of the infrastructure that we have in place that was built for the past, not for the times that we have? But of course, my mind always goes there.
Nadine.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great to listen to the 2 Johns here. I can relate to both of these things. AI regarding what you just said, Jon, it's going to do it for you. No. And also the weather piece, I come to that from Jon D. So for me, it's not one big news that happened, like one singular news that stands out. For me, it's the development overall, if it's in the political sphere, if it's in socioeconomic sphere. Look at elections, look especially in Europe, the kind of the right populist uprise. It's more kind of a trend that I see. And I have the feeling that it has to do with everyone realizing that this increasingly global world has really brought us also challenges that are not so easy to tackle. We all want prosperity, wealth, more, but let's face it, there is a certain end to growth, because growth means that you take it from somewhere else, right? Otherwise, if you look into biologists or whatever, they know everything goes in cycles. So if you take something, you get something here, it was taken away from somewhere else. So you need to give it back, right? And I think maybe then relating back to technology overall, I think technology is a great enabler, but it's not the solution. It's not the holy grail. It needs to be people with creative, critical thinking, the ability to connect different dots from different functional areas to find solutions to very ambiguous problems, ambiguous in the sense, or wicked problems actually, that are plural, that have a plural outcome in terms of there's no one single answer, and that are complex in solving. So by definition, you need more perspective to come together to then find a solution. And here then technology can be enabler because it leaves time to that critical and thought process and the creative thinking part, right? So that's one thing. It's more kind of a process thing, a philosophy, how people have behaved. And I think you can see that fear of the global challenges everywhere in the world, right? The isolationism that is on the uprise, tariffs being imposed left and right. I think that will also be a thing that is going to be important for supply chains, especially procurement. Where do we source from to come around trade barriers? It's going to be important. And then relating what you said, Jon D, about weather, I'm not sure if people realize how big the impact of climate will be on our way of living. It is the number one thing to tackle, and it's a task for mankind that especially companies are at the forefront of battling, because we have the power, we have the voices to move the needle. And I'm also responsible, besides risk management, for sustainability. And I can see if you combine both in a smart way, proactive risk management, you can avoid CO2 that is redundant. You don't have to emit that additional CO2 if you do a good job in risk management. And there's plenty of these examples of synergies and leveraging these synergies when people come together in the supply chain. So hinting to what's the next question, probably what we will see next year, I hope that there is the realization that only together we are stronger, and only together we are better to tackle some of these challenges.
Yeah. Better Together from Jack Johnson was one of my most listened to songs in 2024 based on my Spotify playlist. So.
I should put that on my Spotify playlist now too, for the mood.
Actually, the reason is that I always, whenever I do something, I switch on a playlist and I try to make it topical. So I just look for breakfast playlist and it always starts with that song.
There you go.
So anyway, doesn't matter. But one thing, just real quick, nobody mentioned that that your performance on Supply Chain Pioneer was the biggest news of this year. So we still have to work on that. The podcast.
Well,
second biggest.
That's obvious, Ulf. So we're stating the things that are not obvious. So
good save.
Yeah. Still looking back, we already looked forward a little bit, but we still are in the looking back segment to a certain extent. I'm a big fan of learning and education in general. So for me, it's always important. Okay, is there something you have learned this year where you think, hey, that was such a good learning, I want to share it with the world, because I think all supply chain professionals can benefit from that. Maybe Jon D, anything?
Wow. Off the top of my head, every year you learn more and more. One of the things that comes to mind just off the top of my head is the learning of the complexities of the entire world, right? The complexities of the supply chain and how minor things that you think are minor in one section of the world can then affect things on another continent in a very significant way. It's a very complex situation, and we're all trying to solve it and find solutions for it, but boy, it is really complex. I think that's something I always knew, but even the past year, as to how complex the infrastructure is and the web is overall. And again, looking at disruptions out there, whether it's weather related or whatever, certainly the complexity of it is something I learned even more so, and just continue to go down that path.
So that gave Nadine more time to think about it. So maybe you go next.
Yeah. I can very much relate to the complexity part. And I think that was part of the story that I was telling the previous question, right? That we're living in a world that is super complex. There's no simple answers anymore to questions. And I think that it's scaring many people. And I think also that's the reason why there is so much uprise for populism, because populists always go for the easy answer. And that's why, coming back to what you said, Ulf, education is key. And I'm not talking about the big wheel of education of universities or schools. No, it's everyday secondary education, if you want to call it, at work, talking to your colleagues, peers. It's simple as this is something I value in general. I try to read between the lines when I talk to someone, if they really understood what I'm saying, what's driving their thoughts, what's keeping them back. And I really learned, if you follow up after meetings, when you had bigger rounds or something, and you go into a one-to-one to understand, hey, I saw that reaction of yours, or you were quiet, I expected you to say something, those kind of things. It prompts them to explain their thinking even more. And then you understand what's going on backstage, so to say, in their minds. And that to me was very rewarding this year. Following up, it really took some time here and there because let's face it, 12, 14 hours a day working is normal sometimes. But it's rewarding because you will be able to have an ally on your side with this person that you spoke to, right? So I think building on what you said, Jon, the complexities can only be tackled together in unity. And you can only get unity by building relations with people, gaining their trust. And this is how you first open up. Then people can decide, do they open up back or not? But that's the game I think we're in. So it's people-centered, not technology-centered. And if you have that, you can use technology to uplift people even more.
Good. And what about you, Jon?
I'm just loving listening to this. Two things, first of all, and I'll bring it together. The lesson I learned is patience always pays off. What you're talking about happening now and what's happened with AI, I've been an advocate of agent-based solution development and implementation going back to the late 90s. And equation-based, which is tech-led, people were looking, somebody used the example of a hammer looking for nails to hammer. The reality is we're moving towards an agent-based model where there's an understanding of the unique operating attributes, the interests of everyone. I had this, and I'll go into it another time when we have a chance, about my work with the Department of National Defense in Canada. But you said something interesting, Nadine, is you talked about the complexities and overlap. You remind me of John Elkington's Triple Bottom Line. I don't know if you ever read his book.
Yep.
You've read it? Great book, written in the late 90s, but more relevant today than it ever was, is because where there's an impact or a change in one area, it will have a negative impact in another area. We have to understand what those are and not ignore those. And Jon D, which you were talking about the weather, reminded me of an interview I did many years ago with Hal Good, who talked about how IBM worked out something, an agreement with the Weather Network to track weather that was triggered by that. I mean, all of a sudden now you're seeing people starting to realize that the technology is there to assist, not define our process. We need to understand the unique connectivities and the potential conflicts. So we remove that silo. So what are the individual agents? What are their interests? What are their objectives? If you understand that, you can actually minimize change management because you're not going to be swimming upstream. That's really what I'm seeing finally now, is the disillusionment with AI created the doorway for people to say, we have to communicate and build relationships. And it's not this punchline or this is the right thing to do. It's actually meaningful dialogue, engagement, and creating the framework that then the technology can support. I think you both covered it perfectly with the examples.
Actually, it really came together. It's great. Now, I have a simple question. We wanted to look forward as well and talk a little bit about what you anticipate in the next year. We covered that already to a certain extent in the looking back part. Nadine, anything else you think will happen next year that you haven't touched on until now?
I can just say for my team in general, in the sphere that I'm actually busy in, I think that we will learn from this year and we will try to incorporate some of the lessons learned already into next year, to have those plans, remember, that you make while supply chains happen, but still to have them in the drawer so that you can react if something happens. I'm certain that we will actually act on that. And for the rest, I think it remains to be seen to what extent some of these political developments will hit us, or if it's just barking instead of biting. Mm-hmm. So let's see. For now, let's stay calm and wait. And then the world is not going to end.
And listen to good jazz.
And as opposed to, then I should not listen to myself for singing jazz.
That's actually a good running joke by now.
It's true.
Jon Hansen, what is something that you still anticipate next year, what you haven't covered yet?
When you're in an industry, high-tech procurement, for more than 40 years, you're an old boomer. One of the things that is going to surprise everybody is the maturation process of millennials and Gen X in terms of our profession. we are going to see a movement. I often cite the old saying that when I was younger, somebody told me the story of this expert saying, what's wrong with the youth of today? They're lazy. They don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. And I said, what's that? And it was accredited back to I think Plato or somebody in the past. Every generation presents its own fears. But what I'm starting to see emerge in the thinking is it's almost like full circle. Gen X and millennials are adopting the human relationship element, but they have one advantage that we didn't have when technology started. They're comfortable with technology. And so I think we're going to find that perfect blending together with the new generations coming up. So that's what I'm really keeping my eye on in 2025 is how the next generation of procurement professionals are going to step into this very complicated world in which we live.
That's a very positive outlook. Great. Jon
Yeah.
Davis, what about you?
I think two concepts that we've talked about. So the complexity that we talked about, Nadine, the patience that we talked about, and Jon talked about it. That really is the reason why seemingly things have been a little bit slow. It's very complex, but we have to be patient to get solutions in place to get things done. And you can begin to see things ramping up, companies taking some chances, looking at solutions here overall, but it takes time. And I think we've got to be very patient in that. And certainly looking ahead for next year and the year after and the year after that, as to some of the things that have happened, then ingraining technology into all this, then it gives us solutions. And it's a slow process relatively, but we're getting there. And it'll be really interesting to see here next year as to how things ramp up from a standpoint of making life better for companies, for people, for societies, all of those things overall.
Yeah. I will go out of a limb and say this year was a year where supply chain compliance was very predominant right everywhere and everybody talked about it. And now all of a sudden that all gets toned down quite a bit. I do believe next year, as soon as the trade wars are really starting, this topic will just vanish from planet Earth. And it's super sad because I actually, even the sweater I wear, it's like fairly made in Portugal with very expensive stuff. And that's good for me because I love that I can track the supply chain and know where it's sourced from and where it's made and everything. So I'm a big proponent. So it's sad that we missed an opportunity by making things a little bit too complicated. UFLPA will obviously stay because that can help in certain extents to other means. Yeah. So that's it for the predictions. Not all of them good, but some of them actually amazing. What about your wishes for next year, especially towards maybe the supply chain professionals in general? What are some of the wishes that you have for the next year? And I would say we start with Jon Hansen.
See, I was worried you're going to start with me. Everybody's. I got some time to think now. So go and say it. So buying myself some time delicately. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's about the wishes for supply chain professionals.
I think what you look at is the realization that this is the way I'd like to put it. Somebody once asked me, what do you do? How do you describe supply chain? And I said, do you see that person carrying the bag of groceries from the grocery store? That's supply chain. Do you see the phone in your hand that you use and rely on to text and call? That's supply chain. Do you see everything that happens and goes around involves supply chain? There's not one part of our everyday life that supply chain doesn't touch. And it's my wish that procurement professionals realize that and realize that we are not just transactional beings of getting the best price, which still is a discussion today, surprisingly, but that we have a strategic importance and we have a responsibility to take leadership in the transformation of our organization's supply chain, because without supply chains, where would the organizations be? Where would we be? That's my wish.
Love
Good.
that.
Yeah, actually bought a little bit of time, came up with a great answer. Really good. Solid, for sure. Nadine, what about you?
Fully support what you said, Jon. I think I wish upon supply chain professionals next year a good ally on their side, whether that is on the logistics and transport side, to have an ally on the procurement side, like you, And I also wish for the entire profession to not see each other in different teams of supply chain. Procurement, logistics, we're all part of supply chain, right? To tackle the complexities that you have also mentioned, Jon D, we need to work together. And if you only have one friend on the other side, in parentheses, it's already making your life better. And together you can start convincing people, right? And then on a general note, I just hope that we have the pace of crisis that are hitting us is maybe reduced a bit because it does give you that downtime here and there.
Nice.
I muted myself. Unbelievable. Jon Davis is still left, right? Sorry, I have somebody ringing at my door frantically, and I'm trying to figure out who it is.
Christmas present.
And there you go.
Oh,
There you go.
That's supply chain knocking on your door. See, there we go. Supply chain is everywhere. Supply chain is happening while you're making
right.
plans,
Yeah, it's actually literally it's one of these poor Christmas drivers who tries to deliver a parcel, I believe.
Oh.
And I see him at the door
him a good
now,
tip.
so it's perfect. It's actually exactly that, and it's unfortunate because nobody's at home but me. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll try to tell him to leave it at the door. Good. Jon Davis.
Yeah, just to add to the comments of Jon and Nadine, I'll just be very quick and brief as to be kind, work hard, work together, and come up with solutions and try to have fun along the way and make the world a better place. That simple.
That's good. Yeah. Heal the world, make a better place. That's good. Yeah.
That's a good song.
It's a good song. Yeah, it is. Okay. So first of all, I just have to announce we're at the end of the show. This time, no hobby question. We already had that. So if you want to know the hobbies of our dear speakers, you have to go back.
What hobbies?
You have to go back to the
hobbies. Yeah.
individual podcasts. Yeah. So, I wish for Nadine to have vacation because you sound like you need them. That's my wish. And
Thank
for
you.
everybody else who needs one as well. And with that, I would say thank you so much for all of you for being here. It was a pleasure. And now I do you can follow me or not, but I'm going to wink in the camera and say bye-bye. So bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Was an honor.
Thank
Bye.
you.
This was Supply Chain Pioneers. Thanks for watching, listening, or however you are enjoying this podcast. You can find Supply Chain Pioneers on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all other major podcast players, as well as on YouTube at Ulf Talk Supply Chain. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next time.